Hello, hello, and welcome to the second half of season 5. I can't believe that we're already halfway through the year. My name is Debbie Heiser. I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can lead a lit up life. And with that, I want to again welcome you. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the show.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love to do without sacrificing what's important to them. I have a real urgency around helping business owners get really clear about the life they want to lead so that the business can be a conduit to making that happen, versus a lot of what I see is where the business runs your life, and that's not good. So with that being said, today we're going to talk a little bit about dealing with stress and what are some hacks when dealing with stress. And I recently came across this idea of an acronym. I don't think they actually call them acronyms. I forget what the actual term is, but improve. And improve, using the letter of each of those, stands for imagery, meaning, prayer and practice. And don't get caught up, it doesn't have to be religious. Relaxation, one thing in the moment, vacation, and encouragement. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I have been uncovering even personally is that sometimes there is subconscious stress that happens. I was talking to someone earlier about hiring someone and asking kind of why were they resisting putting out an offer today versus doing it in 2 weeks. And they were on vacation, but part of it was the conversation around get it done because it's sucking energy from you because you know you need to do this. And it just sits there in your subconscious, and in this case, sometimes the conscious. So I'm finding sometimes that there are things that I have found that create awareness for me of being in some stress that I'm not 100% conscious of. Some of that is when I don't sleep well, when I wake up 2 or 3 times in the middle of the night. Now, I will tell you, I have an Aura ring, and for those of you on YouTube, you can see it. They come in multiple different colors. This thing is pretty awesome. It's got little sensors on the inside of it, and it tracks my sleep. It tracks my activity, very similar to an iPhone watch or a Garmin, that tracks some of that. What I love about it, though, is it does show me, like, if I eat too late in the evening, my sleep is interrupted. It shows me the movement I make. It shows breathing potential disturbances that happen. It shows me what kind of REM or light sleep or deep sleep I'm in, and I can tell a difference. And I've noticed trends based on if I'm eating something sweet or if I have a drink. And I think I mentioned on a previous podcast, which I'm kind of glad about, that I had COVID for the first time in April of this year. And ever since then, wine and things don't taste all that great. Now, a really good glass of champagne still tastes good. But the point being is that I can see these things that interrupt my sleep, and that's not necessarily stress induced, although potentially eating or drinking might be stress induced and then play out in my sleep. But if I'm not sleeping well, I'm waking up 2 or 3 times in the middle of the night thinking about things. A lot of times that's what stress does. The other thing that I find is that I get into this really high task mode where I don't stop and bring my human to work and drop into my heart and really talk to people as people. It's all about, like, what are the tasks that need to get done? Other things that I found about stress is that I will find that I tend to be a little bit achy. And sometimes that happens because of food. I find that I'm eating things that don't honor my body. Like I have an allergy to whey. Well, whey is found in most dairy. So if I eat a piece of pizza that has cheese on it, that's going to upset my digestive system. And so sometimes when I'm stressed, I'll turn to that, right? There are other things that happen, meaning when I'm under stress, I don't necessarily reach out and connect with those people that I love the most. For instance, my sisters, and I don't think I've ever talked to them about this, but this last year, it hasn't been stressful, but I've had a lot of activity going on. And so therefore, what ends up happening is I'm not reaching out as frequently to them. And so that's a sure sign for me that there's subconscious stress, right? So let's talk through this acronym. And when we think about the word improve, I love that, but be careful not to get into a construct of I'm not good enough, so therefore I need to improve, because that's just crap. And it's just a construct that we've put together about what's right or wrong. It just means, like, for me, I look at I'm a constant learner. I love to learn. And so I'm constantly growing. I'm constantly improving, but also making sure that we're staying in the gain and not looking at the gap. And I'll talk more about that in an upcoming podcast. So what does all this mean? Well, let's talk about imagery. So I'm going to share some options with you. And some of this is about just taking yourself to a different place. So like if you like immediately when I think about myself, a place that makes me feel safe or very peaceful and calm, I think about my then husband and I used to own a condo in Maui, and there was this jetty that had a little bench on it. And I would go out there in the mornings and read and have a cup of coffee and watch the sun come up behind me. It hit the two islands across from me. The waves are coming in, the turtles are swimming. It's kind of like my place when I want to find calm and serenity. So one of the things you can do with imagery is imagine yourself in that place for yourself. And if you don't have a place that you physically have been, imagine one up, use your creativity. Now, another way you can do this is actually, and I've done this before, where I imagine myself on an elevator, and every floor that I'm going down in the elevator, I'm relaxing more and more because I'm letting go of that stress. That stress is going out of my feet and leaving my body. And sometimes I have to be careful because that meditation actually puts me to sleep, like when I'm thinking about going down floors and letting go of that stress. So visualizing the stress leaving your body. And imagery, I might point out, there's a lot of pro athletes and really high level athletes that use imagery. And there's actually been scientific research that showed basketball teams that just imagined making free throws actually outdid the teams that went and actually just did free throws. So that imagery, I know Tiger Woods has used imagery before, watching himself make the shot and watching where the shot is headed. So it's not just woo-woo stuff. And then you can also imagine, like I've imagined before, and I talk to my clients about this imagery of sometimes when we're stressed, it's like there's this line, and this line feels like it's a cliff on the edge of the Grand Canyon. And if you haven't been to the Grand Canyon, just imagine any cliff, right? And so you're standing on the edge of this cliff, and it looks really scary. It looks like if you take a step, you're going to fall, you're going to tumble. And, you know, your brain, from the brain science perspective, says you're going to die, right? But ultimately, what I imagine is when I take that step, that it's that physical place where I'm taking a step exists. And when I turn around, that crack is just a crack in the sidewalk. So when I can visually imagine that and say, okay, walk through this, just step into it, lean into it, it helps tremendously. So that's the imagery part of it. The other piece about meaning is answering some questions. And these questions are really about, like, what is this potentially calling forward in me? If I have some external, or excuse me, some subconscious stress about something, identifying where the stress is coming from is important, right? And sometimes I may be saying to myself, I'm not stressed about enrolling people in my mastermind, but yet I'm waking up in the middle of the night thinking about people to contact, or I'm waking up in the middle of the night, like in a prayer of, okay, God, who's supposed to come into my life about this, right? So that's a sure sign that I've got this subconscious stress. I don't feel stressed about it, but it's coming up in different ways. So the meaning then is about thinking about what's being called forward in you. Like, is there anything I'm meant to be learning about myself? You know, in some cases it's about letting go and surrender. That's what I find most of the time. But like, what are some lessons that you can take away from this? Also thinking about giving meaning to something about how will things be different in the future if this happens? How will things be different in the future if it doesn't? Because sometimes if we can walk through that and state it out loud, it takes some of the stress away. Also, really thinking about in the grand scheme of things. And I talked to many people that during COVID, this became something that became more of an awareness for people about, in the big scheme, how much does it really matter? So asking those deeper questions to get to know and understand what that's about. Now, prayer doesn't have to be religious. For me, it's about connecting with the Trinity. Other people, it might be connecting with the universe, but prayer is about connecting with a force that is bigger than yourself. Something that helps you gain perspective. And part of this is about prayer / practice, because we have to get into a practice, whether it's meditation, whether it's having a practice of hiking in the woods once a week so that you feel centered and grounded, or doing a nature walk. If it's about whatever that is for you, you know, my son says he'd much rather be in a boat feeling like he's communicating with God than be in church wishing he was fishing. And right, wrong, or indifferent, whether or not you agree with that or not, the point is that like where he feels closest to spirit is when he's out on the lake in his boat fishing. And that connection, we all have different places for that. So part of that too is about getting into a practice. And again, I go back to some of the things that I heard in the church all the time was, oh, I just need to get up earlier and study my Bible. Oh, I just need to get up earlier and pray. It's about an ongoing thing. I used to talk to my high school youth when I was a youth pastor about, it's like keeping in touch with your friends. And at the time, you know, cell phones were, I'm aging myself, coming out, and it was about, hey, it's like picking up your cell phone and talking to your friend every day, and throughout the day texting, you know, so it's about this constant being able to ground yourself and tap into spirit for yourself. That's what practice is. Then if you think about one thing in the moment as the O, so we tend to go into the past, which creates depression, or we tend to go into the future, which creates anxiety. And so if we can bring ourselves back to the present moment, which, you know, a coach that I follow that I consider a mentor, Peter Crone, talks about, it's kind of funny because physically you're not in the past and physically you're not in the future, physically you're present. So all you have to do is get in touch with your body. And so a friend of mine was learning this technique, Katrina Doran, and what she said too, and tapping does this as well, is for those of you that are just listening, if you take your arms and you place the palm of your hand on one elbow and the other in the crink of your 90-degree angled. So in this case, my left hand is on my right elbow and my right hand is in the crease of the inside of my arm. And if you lightly lift up and just let your fingers go across your forearms and across your hands in a slow motion, for me, this settles me into my body because I feel the light movement across my palms. It helps me embody my body. And that's partially about them being present. Sometimes it's taking deep breaths, doing box breathing, which is just simply counting to 4 as you inhale, counting to 4 as you pause, counting to 4 as you exhale, counting to 4 as you pause. So that's that one thing in the moment to keep yourself present. You can also sit on the ground. That helps keep you grounded. I will say too, you know, there's positive and negative ions, and I actually have pads that I put my feet on in the summer and sometimes have up on the top of my desk for my hands to be on, because we don't walk around in the grass as much as we used to barefoot. And There are so many of these ions running around with our phones, with our computers, all of these things. And so just putting your feet in the grass and letting yourself physically, like literally be grounded to the earth, will also help kind of that staying connected, staying in the moment. Sometimes too, it's about just picking up a flower, right? Stopping and smelling the roses, squeezing your hands together, humming. There's all sorts of different things that you can do in that piece as far as getting grounded, what that means. It doesn't have to be anything super long, right? It can be simply getting up out of your chair and moving and sitting on the ground. And so I'm challenging each one of you to go out and stick your feet in the grass. And then the V in improve stands for vacation. Now, I get that like your brain probably went where mine did when I was introduced to this. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going on vacation in August, blah, blah, blah. What this really means, excuse me, is taking a vacation from the situation that you're struggling with. So if it's 5 minutes, 5 days, whatever, even if it's just a few minutes to go walk outside and walk around the block, like removing yourself physically and mentally away from the issue that you're dealing with and coming back. It's kind of like in the days when people, and more people are putting puzzles together these days, but in the days when you used to put puzzles together, sometimes you needed to walk away from it in order to see where the pieces went because you were too in it and it was too hard to see the bigger picture. So thinking about taking some little mini breaks, right? Like picturing your safe place, your happy place, smelling a flower, taking a vacation, like listening to your favorite song, or I have a 30-second dance party button. Go outside. I mentioned that as well. Sit in one of your favorite yoga poses for a minute or two. Just something to allow yourself to step away and then come back. And then the E stands for, what does the E stand for? Well, I've lost that one. The E stands for encouragement. And this is where affirmations sometimes are helpful. Also finding people that are in your life that tend to encourage you versus bringing you down. And so I mentioned the people at your table. Think about who you're hanging around. Do they inspire you? Do they lift you up? Do they help you move forward, or are they pulling you back? And sometimes relationships you're in are pulling you back and you choose to stay there for one reason or another, right? And so it's important to understand that and be mindful about it. But when you think about encouragement, how can you encourage yourself? I will tell you almost every day, I'm listening to a podcast. I love the Happiness Lab. I love anything Peter Crone is on. I'm also part of his Freedom Community and I listen to his videos. I listen to David Nagel. There are many people out there to listen to that can help bring your vibration up. There's some days like this morning, I just cranked the my Spotify and had music playing while I was getting ready, and it was upbeat music. So do those things that help encourage you and help you stay in the moment, help you stay grounded, help you raise that vibration, because the law of vibration is true. You can only attract that which you're vibrating. And I've mentioned this before, but I can't help myself to not put some of the universal laws in what I'm talking about. So as you think about stress, encourage yourself, do some things to help let it go, do some things that are relaxing, whether that means going and taking a hot bath, whether that means taking a walk around the block. I don't necessarily recommend a glass of wine because really that's doing the opposite physically to your body. So do something that gets you moving and gives you a different dopamine hit. And it might mean once in a while you have a really good piece of chocolate. So with that, folks, that's our podcast for today. Please go out, take care of yourself, be healthy, because we can't show up and be our best self and do what we're called to do unless we are healthy. So with that, we'll see you next week. Everybody have a great week. Thanks so much for listening. The song Ride is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.